I'm Kat.
And I'm Hayley.
And this is Night Classy,
a tipsy night class teaching the oddities and curiosities you never learned in school.
Where are you taking us on this learning journey, Hayley?
For the learning journey today, I will be teaching us about an alternative and discredited personality assessment from the Victorian era, whose relics are now used as decor.
Wait, did you say personality assessment?
I did.
So this is a Victorian personality BuzzFeed test?
Yeah, it is. Truly.
Hayley,
it's as
I've
credible
never
as one
loved
too.
you more. I'm so excited.
I think you probably know about this topic too, but we're going to take a slightly deep dive. There's way more to this topic than I can cover in this episode, so this will scratch the surface for you. But
Well, I have no idea what it is yet.
You'll know.
I can't wait.
I'm so
excited.
What are you teaching us?
I will be telling you about the first ever modern gender affirming, not reaffirming, surgery. As far as we know, it's the first. And happy
Cool.
Pride, people.
Happy Pride, everybody.
Yes.
We've got some colorful lights back here, kind of resembling the Pride rainbow. I don't think that was what was in Alex's mind when he got them for us, but it works.
But now it is, and I wish I ordered a freaking Pride shirt at the beginning of June, and it's still not here, and I don't think I'm going to have it in time, but that's okay. I'll wear it every other month of the year.
Oh my goodness. Why is it taking so long? It's 2023.
Because it's like from a local thing, and so they are like wait until they have all the orders to print them. So I don't know what's happening, but
Fair.
I don't have it yet.
Yeah, Pride might be recognized as 1 month, but we celebrate it year round.
Yes, ma'am. And it's probably even better that I wear it in every
Outside
other
of
month
June.
outside of June. Yeah. But yeah, so that's what we'll be doing.
Okay, well, I'm really excited to learn
I don't know
about
where to
that.
go from
I
here.
know.
That's what happens when we talk before recording. You guys were saying really cool stuff about Titanic and everything, and then we record and it's like, well, nothing.
Yeah, it's almost like we haven't done almost 200 episodes. What episode are we even on? I don't even know.
170.
170.
Wow.
All right, dang. Yeah, we are. Oh, guess what?
What?
I reached over a 200-day streak on Duolingo.
I'm so proud of you. So proud. I dropped
Yo
out after
hablo
50.
español, bitches.
Sí, de veras.
Puntas.
I remember teaching my brother one sentence in Spanish when I was in high school, and it was, make me a sandwich, bitch. And I never should have done that because he used it all the time. And now it's like a greeting. Yeah. Hazme un bocadillo, puta.
Instant karma. Whoa.
What?
Hold on.
Oh my God.
I had a smiley face in my notes, and then I like waved my cursor over it and it turned into a frown. How did I do that?
Well, let's
What the heck?
figure it out later.
Spooky.
Okay, I'll stop.
What does it mean?
I hope this is no one's first time listening. My brain is fried.
It can be chaotic
I don't
in here,
understand.
you guys. School's out for the summer.
It really can. Also, I talked about wanting a chihuahua last week, and I got multiple messages saying like to do it.
There's so many opportunities for you to have a chihuahua.
There really are, but I can't have one. I will not, like, if one falls into my possession, like if I find one on the street, yeah, I'll keep it. I don't need to seek it out. But what I did do to quench my thirst is I'm befriending stray cats in our neighborhood. And
That's a good method.
I made a cat condo on our front porch.
What?
Not like a real one, but I took a plastic bin and I cut a hole in it and put some towels inside, and I put some like a little bowl of food out there. So now I'm like creating a hostel for neighborhood strays.
You're gonna have like cats passing out on your front porch in this Memphis heat. They're gonna go in there and immediately just like lose consciousness.
Well, it's in the shade, so I think. Well,
It's
and there's
still,
a hole in it. They
98
can get
degrees.
out. They're not going to be trapped in there.
The cat killer.
No, don't say that. But we have one cat with one eye and another cat with no tail.
Yeah.
So together they make a whole cat.
They've been fighting.
Probably. But yeah, so that's what I've been up to
Have they
this
used
summer.
your cat cabin?
Yes, I set it up yesterday, and today I checked on it, and the towel inside was all rumpled up.
Oh.
So is it cats? Is it rats? Is it raccoons?
Possums?
I don't know.
All of the above would be acceptable.
Yeah, but someone was in there.
Yeah, we need something furry up in that box.
As long as it has fur,
We're good.
I'm here for it. It's fine.
No snakes? You're
Yeah,
not good with a
please,
snake?
please, no snakes. I
Please,
love
no snake. Who are you saying that to?
I love a
The
pet.
universe?
I love a pet snake. I do not like a surprise snake.
That's fair.
Yeah,
That's fair.
snakes only when I know they're coming. I don't want to be surprised.
Conditional love. Okay, I see how it is.
If they're not domesticated, I don't trust them.
They're snaky snakes.
One time I thought I was grabbing a garden hose because it was green, and then it was a garter snake.
Ooh.
And as soon as I touched
You
it,
freaking
slithered
like,
away. And I'll never recover from that.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. That does sound scary.
It's very scary.
Well, we have some patron shout outs to
Yay.
give. I would like to start by shouting out Caitlin Else from Centerville, Texas. I hope you're keeping it cool in Texas. I can't imagine the climate or political climate. So stay cool, Caitlin. Thank you for joining our Patreon.
Stay cool. And I would like to shout out Olivia Newman of Ohio.
Hey, OH.
How do you do the little O? Wait.
I say OH, you say IO. We spell the name of it.
OHIO. Did I
job.
do it?
Yep,
Okay,
nailed
great.
it.
Great, I nailed it.
Moving on.
But she is a wrangler and trail guide for guided horseback tours at Uncle Buck's Dance Barn and Riding Stable. I don't know if I was supposed to give the exact name of her place of work. I don't know.
Too late.
Too late. And
I'm sure there's plenty of Uncle Buck's riding stables in Ohio.
no, there's not, because I looked it up because I want to go, because it's a haunted trail ride through haunted tunnels built in the 1800s, and there is nowhere I'd rather be. It's 10 hours away from here, so probably too far. I guess I'd rather not be in the car than for 10 hours than be there. But
Well,
it sounds
I'm not sure
awesome.
if that's true. There's plenty of good things to do in Ohio. We can take a little trip. Hocking Hills is beautiful.
Okay.
It's my home state.
Okay.
Am I selling it? Are you sold? There's horses.
Yes.
Hauntings.
Horses and hauntings are my two favorite H's.
Chili.
My two favorite H's. Horses and hauntings.
What about Hayley's?
That's my third favorite. Just kidding. That one's not even on the list because I
Oh
like
my
it so
God.
much.
Yeah, it's didn't even make the
It's
list.
above.
She didn't even know what I was talking about.
I'm slow on the uptake sometimes. You know this. My processing is delayed.
You're like, oh, I like Holly's more than Hayley's.
No, but this job sounds like my dream job. And if you're looking for seasonal employees, let me know. Maybe I could spend the summer in Ohio.
Yeah, go do an internship.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
I will do an unpaid internship at this job. This
It'll
sounds
be
incredible.
like 5 to 10 degrees cooler than it is in Memphis. So there's that to look forward to, too.
Is it cooler in Ohio?
Yeah, just a
Really?
little
I thought
bit.
Ohio was hot as fuck too.
It is hot as fuck. And I was like, there's no way. When I moved here in June of 2019, I was like, there's no way it's going to be that much hotter. But I got out of the car in Memphis and I was like, oh my God.
I know. I
It's
still
like-
remember stepping out of the airport and being hit by a wall of steam. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh,
The
wow.
wet
We're here.
heat. I'd also like to shout out Ronaldo R. Thank you for joining our Patreon. We really appreciate all of the support that comes from our patrons. We have fun recording the extra content and getting to see everyone who joins the first Friday of each month for our cocktail hours. So it's awesome for your support, and it's awesome just getting to know you all. So thank you.
Thank y'all.
I love you.
Love you. Should we just get started? I feel like
I think we should.
I need structure in my
Okay.
life right now. I'm struggling.
Well, I will give you some structure in the form of a lesson. So, Clarissa Harlow Barton, also known as Clara, is one of the most honored women in history. Barton risked her life to bring supplies and support soldiers in the fields during the Civil War. She founded the American Red Cross in 1881. At the age of 59, and she led it for the next 28 years. But before she ever found the Red Cross, I imagine that she could have almost been deterred from doing anything of the likes when a man named Lorenzo Fowler studied her head
Oh
and the
God,
shape of her
it's this
skull.
fucking shit. I thought this was going to be like the Ouija boards of personality tests. I was like, no, I've never heard of that.
It kind of is like the Ouija boards of personality. It's all just made up.
Yeah, I took so many because I studied anthropology in college, and the number of classes on this bullshit.
Really? You took
through.
classes on this?
Well, about how it's bad.
yeah, it's not good.
Yeah.
But yes, they studied her head, or he studied her head to determine character traits. And he told her that she will never assert herself. She will suffer wrong first, but for others, she will be fearless.
Oh, so like whatever happens, he predicted it.
Yeah, it's kind of like getting your zodiac sign
No,
read.
that's real. You
It is
shut
real.
your fucking mouth.
Your dirty mouth, wash it out with soap. But sometimes if you're reading in a magazine, they'll give you a mix of things for your sign where it's like, well, this could really mean anything, but you're going to pull from the things that you want to be true or relate to.
I have a number of astrology apps on my phone, and I definitely have some that I believe more than others. Like I've deemed certain ones to be
not
reliable
today.
sources and others to not.
What's a reliable one to you?
Cosign or co-star.
Yeah, I was going to say CoStar is the only one that I can think of
Yeah,
off the top of my head.
CoStar is the main one. And then I think the one that I don't trust is called, I don't even know. It's called Astrology something. It's purple.
Add me on CoStar.
I think I did add you on CoStar.
Oh,
we
I'm
are
never
friends.
on it. And yeah, I only see CoStar when it gives me those random notifications where it's like, today is yours if you let it be.
My favorite thing on CoStar is the do's and don'ts.
What's your do's and don'ts of the day?
I'm looking it up right now. Hold on, I'm sorry.
That could be at the top of our episode. We start doing that. What's your do of the day?
I would love that. My do is salt, knickknacks, and houseplants. Absolutely. And my don't is repetition, montages, and nod off.
That is not what I expected at all. I thought that it was going to be some concrete thing like don't cross the street if you don't have the walk sign.
That's the best thing. It's like it just gives you like random shit.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, like I will put extra salt on my fries today.
Yeah, I definitely
will. I will go to Goodwill and buy all the knickknacks. Good idea, co-star. Why do I keep trying to call it cosign?
Because co-star is co-signing your life at this point.
It is. I would, before I co-signed something, I would go to CoStar and see if financial decisions was in my do or don't that day.
Don't sign. Don't money today. That's what it would say. Don't. Money, checks, credit.
And then I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, it's clear.
Mm-hmm.
Clear as can be. In 1775, Johann, I don't know why I didn't include his last name, but I didn't.
He's like Beyonce.
It is me, Johann.
He's the only one.
He tried to use physiognomy to link personality to facial structures and expressions. He broke the face down into its main parts, your nose, eyes, brows, and mouth, and then he created meanings. For example, the term stuck up came from this. When a person with a sloped nose was having a reading, and they had an aura of superiority, who's like,
probably because their nose is so cute.
Stuck up. Yeah, you get.
Of course you're stuck up. You have a cute nose.
I have some pictures of this time that I have in the slides here, and it's so funny. These are all like deceitful traits, apparently. It's like deceitful mouth, and the person has an underbite, and a deceitful eye is like.
Yeah, this is giving racism.
Totally. And it's just insane to see it labeled like this and that this was in like published.
Yeah, they're
work.
saying it out loud.
They are. They definitely are. And spoiler alert, there's no scientific research that was done, but it started this theory that observable structures had some link to inner functioning and vice versa.
I did see something about, and it was in a TikTok. I don't know if it was real. The video claimed there was evidence to support this, but that narcissists like have thicker eyebrows.
Yeah, that was one of my fun facts.
Oh,
for extra
that
credit.
was you.
The narcissistic
Okay.
scowl
Yeah.
theory.
Yeah. So, but it was like they had thicker eyebrow hair, right? Not just that they were like they were scowling.
Yeah. And I got that from TikTok. So you may have recently seen the TikTok.
No,
as
I
well.
think I'm probably remembering you telling me it as seeing a TikTok.
Everything I know now, I just remember as a TikTok.
Yeah, me too. And sometimes I trick myself into thinking I read it somewhere, but it was just a TikTok.
Smart. I read.
Reddit.
And as you've hinted at already, these theories are harmful. They're used to defend racism and slavery and colonialism. So any light points of this lesson are about the ridiculousness of these theories. And I don't go very, very deep into the results and how they were used to defend racism. I will get into it, but this lesson is not on how they're racist. I think it's pretty easy to see.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to be very clear about that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So at this point in time, there were two trains of thought. People thought that the brain was this homogeneous function. It was this one working thing that all worked together. And then other people thought that the brain had different areas that processed different things. So we weren't really sure. There wasn't a ton of research, but phrenology or craniology was a branch off of this initial idea. And it was used in the 19th century to analyze a person's psychological strengths and weaknesses by attempting to correlate the size and shape of regions of the skull with supposed functions of the underlying areas of the brain, according to psychology.org. Nailed that quote. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the whole thing was there.
It's just there for the taking, baby. Full sentences only. And from a young age in the late 1700s, Franz Joseph Gall noticed similarities among his classmates who he said could easily memorize and recite passages. According to him, they all had prominent eyes and large foreheads. When he went on to college, he noticed the same thing. This observation planted the seed for phrenology, which at the time he called, quote, the theory of organology and the method of cranioscopy. It later was shortened to phrenology.
Makes sense.
Gall hypothesized the organ that's in charge of verbal memory must lie directly behind the eyes and be so big that it pushes the eyeballs out of the socket. And therefore, other areas in the brain must also push out different parts of our skulls because they're so big. So big. He speculated that these other traits and mental abilities correspond with different areas of the brain. He also thought the brain was a muscle composed of smaller muscles, like a kind of like a Russian nesting doll. Okay. And those larger muscles created these bumps in the skull, which explained, this is sarcasm, which explained why everyone has different skull shapes and different bumps in different areas.
But we've cut open people's heads before. And we've
seen
we have been all that everyone's brain is more or less
heads.
The same shape.
Yeah. Except for the koalas. We can't forget about the koalas' chicken breast
Except for the
brain.
koalas' nasty chicken cutlet boob brain. But like he knows objectively that brains don't have weird lumps, right? Why is he saying this?
I figure that, well, because it's dumb. Like,
right. It's really obviously it's dumb, but like it's also like easily disprovable. By just opening up a cadaver's skull.
Yeah, but at the same time, you know, your brain has grooves and all these lumps. So maybe it wasn't a discernible difference that you could view just by looking at the brain, but, you know, just small enough that it created a bump on your skull.
Okay.
Who knows? I'm not trying to justify it. I'm trying to like
you're
figure
answering
out,
my question.
Yeah, that's what I would guess.
Okay.
And also he's like, you know, I'm a scientist. This sounds good.
And I love that he's like, everyone who's good at memorizing has a bulgy forehead and bulgy eyes. And then what if you're just in class with this guy and he's like, wow, like you did such a good job studying for this test. Like I wish I could study as well as you. And it's just a backhanded compliment. He's saying it.
Your eyes are massive.
Your face is bulgy.
Your eyes are so big. Can touch them.
Ew.
Gall became a doctor and started working at a mental asylum. He was excited to be around so many people struggling with their mental health because he could study them. For him, it was a perfect case study since all the patients had at least one personality trait in common. And in his words, that common personality trait was insanity. He connected their mental insanity to the fact that they also had bumps on the sides of their heads.
They all had bumps.
They all had bumps.
Sir, those are ears. We all have that. Stop making these crazy
how
assumptions.
Strange. They're so flappy. You got flappy bumps in your bulgy eyes. It's like he just needs to get his eyesight checked at the end of the day. And Gall made generalizations to support his theories, and he made these generalizations based on sample sizes as small as 2 people.
Okay.
So, yeah, the scientific method was not a factor. In the late 1700s, he started collecting human skulls, amassing over 300 of them in his private collection, including those of 103 famous men, 67 mental patients, and 69 criminals, according to Patrick Kelly's video on YouTube, The Dark Story of Phrenology. Gall began lecturing on phrenology from his house.
What?
Yeah, he just had people in and like showed them the skulls and spoke the quote truth of phrenology.
Okay, if someone was opening up their home saying they would like tell me my personality by feeling my head, I can't lie, I'd be there. So fast.
But okay, back then or like right now,
both.
You would do that.
Like minus the racism shit that comes. Like if someone's like, let me feel your skull and I will tell you your future.
Yeah,
yes, I'm in immediately.
Let's feel our skulls and we can look at the map of phrenology and see what we've got going on.
Do you ever do that? Do you ever like feel all the bumps on your head and think about what you'd look like bald?
Yeah,
me
I
too.
do. I massage my scalp like almost every night. I'm constantly touching my skull.
I have a bunch of weird bumps.
And you all know this. Like, I want to see my own brain.
Yeah, that is
so
something
bad.
I know about you.
And Kat, those are the bumps he's talking about, right?
Yeah.
You were just saying, you're like, there are no bumps.
Well, there's bumps on your head, but your brain isn't
he's talking about the skull, right?
No, but he was saying the bulges on your brain create these bumps. And I was saying, like, if you opened up someone's head, you would see there's no bulges on their brain.
Oh, right. I thought you were saying there were no bumps in the skull.
No, there are bumps on your skull.
Definitely.
For sure.
I wonder if he saw like a baby who didn't get enough tummy time. You know how their heads are really flat? What he would think of that.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
Their brain is so big, it's growing out the top of their head.
Yeah. Or if he saw a newborn baby after they came out of the vaginal canal, the cone head.
Yeah.
What would he think?
I don't know.
I don't know either. It's kind of scary. Not gonna. It's amazing and it's scary. It's like,
yeah, I'm sure he did have an opinion about that, right?
Not that I saw, but I'm sure he
Okay.
did. He seems to have quite a lot of opinions.
Yeah.
At the turn of the century, the church put the kibosh on phrenology because they saw it in opposition to Sky Daddy's intelligent design.
True.
Vienna forbade Gall from practicing there, so he had to leave. Gall and his protege, Johann Caspar Spurzheim, toured Europe giving lectures on phrenology, and this is when it really started to gain popularity. In 1809, Gall began writing his book named, and I have to read the entire title of this book because this man just loves extra words. It's insane. So his book is called The Anatomy and Physiology of the Nervous System in General, and of the Brain in particular, with observations upon the possibility of ascertaining the several intellectual and moral dispositions of man and animal by the configuration of their heads.
The part of the brain that makes you bad at writing is really big in his.
It's concave.
Yeah.
And although there were plenty of critics of phrenology in its heyday, it gained popularity in the early 19th century, particularly between 1810 and 1840. I pulled this quote directly from Smithsonian Magazine because I could not paraphrase it better. Quote, in the early years of the 19th century, Gall's ideas spread across Europe. But it was in America, a country starved for a, quote, scientific insight to the human mind, and one that offered the hope of individual perfectibility, that phrenology would find its most devoted and enduring audience.
Americans love personality tests.
They love personality tests. They love individualism, and racism was a huge and is pretty big here.
Yeah, it's the three pillars of the American psyche.
The American dream.
Yeah.
For a still unknown reason, Gall and his protege Spurzheim had a permanent falling out. They broke up, and this resulted in Spurzheim leaving Gall and leaving Germany and introducing Americans to phrenology. He toured the UK and eventually headed to America, where he lectured from city to city for months and converted thousands. Without Gall by his side, Spurzheim changed a few names of the brain structures. For example, Gall had originally named a part of the brain the organ of murder. And Spurzheim was like, I don't know, I just feel like there's a better way to put that. So he changed organ of murder to destructiveness. Oh
I liked the other one.
It'd be so funny if he's like, okay, and this is organ of murder. This is the part of brain that helps you identify large groups of crows.
Do you know what part of the skull the organ of murder was on?
I don't.
I want to know if I have it.
It was like right between the eyes.
Ooh.
Your third eye, organ of murder.
I don't have that.
I'm not sure. You don't have a bump there?
I don't think
Oh,
so.
no.
I have a little indentation up here by my hairline because I whacked my head on the corner of my trundle bed when I was a kid and it made a little dent.
I had a loft bed as a kid, and I remember like waking up for some reason and raising my head so fast it just went pop on the ceiling. Yeah, I was not used to the ceiling being a foot and a half away from my face.
Yeah, that's rough. I don't know how I used to sleep on a top bunk as a kid.
Yeah, there's no way. Now I can't even imagine going up a ladder without shoes on because of how the ladder pegs are so thin. It hurts my feet.
In freaking college, we had bunk beds, but they didn't have ladders. You had to just like climb them like a mountain.
There was one of my friends in college, our freshman year. He did what a lot of freshmen do, and he was like belligerently drunk, and he slept on the top bunk. He fell out of bed while trying to get water in the night, and he bashed his like eye, like this area, on his desk chair, and he had to go to the hospital and get stitches. Like the whole half of his face was just like terribly bruised.
It's dangerous.
Really dangerous. There's no good reason that freshmen in college should have bunk beds.
Well,
it's
like they don't have
irresponsible.
fucking enough space.
They don't. That's true.
Which
too.
is also irresponsible. But
and another thing.
And another thing.
We had the oldest and gnarliest dorm at my university, like roaches beyond. The bathrooms were awful. And why are we paying the same as the students who get the nice new, like everyone gets their own bathroom dorms? What is that?
You have to pay the same?
Yes.
That's fucked up.
University of Cincinnati, we have some fucking issues. But anyway, back to the learning journey. So he changed it to destructiveness. Spurzheim also led this movement, kind of guided it down more of like a self-help direction. He encouraged people to pursue like the healthiest form of their brain, saying like, okay, your brain can get better. You can better yourself with like diet and exercise. And this was really popular amongst the American people, that they could like do something to change the bumps in their brain. Spurzheim only got to tour for 6 months in the United States before he died of typhoid in Boston. But he definitely left his mark on the world. They had his remains sketched to remember him by, and Harvard's president handled his funeral planning and all the cost of his funeral. And the American Journal of Medicine wrote, quote, "The prophet is gone, but his mantle is upon us."
Oh my God, they really liked it.
Yeah, they loved it. And it makes sense since, you know, they use this to justify slavery and racism and colonialism.
Right.
Because the American Journal of Medicine is, you know, read rich white man.
Mm-hmm.
Criticisms of phrenology came with its popularity as well, but so did a lot of followers. Like I said, rich white men who owned land were really big fans and early adopters of phrenology in the United States, and they wanted to gatekeep that shit. Like, they wanted to practice it themselves and use it to support their fucked up beliefs. The phrenology bug bit a ministry student, Orson Fowler, who loved it. He took it upon himself to lecture his classmates on the practice of phrenology.
Can you fucking imagine?
No. He gets up for his statistic class and is like, I'm going to teach you about phrenology. He would even read their skulls for 2 cents.
Okay, that would be fun. I'm all about the recreational skull reading.
What's the most you would pay to get your skull read?
$100.
$100 max.
If depending on someone's credentials.
Okay, that's fair.
What about you?
Oh, probably 10.
Okay. I mean, realistically, that's more like what I would do.
Yeah. If you had all the money in the world, 100.
Yeah. If we're at a street fair and someone has a booth, $10.
$10. Yeah, I would do that.
Yeah.
If I got a written report or something, like eventually when it was really in its heyday, they had these sheets, like forms that they would just like check the different areas that applied to the person.
Okay.
And they would make notes. And a lot of it was just so much jargon.
Yeah.
That you're like, what does this even mean?
But then you have a little souvenir.
Yeah. And that's what I would want.
For that.
And the bust, the phrenology busts are pretty cool. I know obviously it's a fucked up past, but they're just cool.
Someone on Reddit found, maybe it was Facebook, in one of the thrifting groups I'm in, you might have seen this. They found a vintage intubation dummy at Goodwill.
What?
Yeah, like what you would practice doing intubations on in med school. It's like a silicone face on a board.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And then there's that real skull that's encased in glass in our local oddity shop.
Mm-hmm.
I want that thing so bad.
Buy it. Life's too short.
Maybe next summer
when
I get that sweet, sweet summer pay. Well, anyway, back to Orson Fowler. He not only preached to his classmates, but he also influenced the rest of his family. And soon enough, Orson and his younger brother Lorenzo, both frustrated evangelists, set out on the road to share the truth of phrenology. This is also when Lorenzo read Clara Barton's of the Red Cross's skull. Today, many of us take personality assessments on a computer. In the early to mid 19th century, employers actually advertised jobs aligned with specific phrenology profiles. And women would sometimes style their hair to show off preferred phrenology traits. And a ton of phrenology parlors open up all over the nation. Many of them earned the reputation as scammers, but some of them were legit. Phrenologists believe the brain consisted of 27 different muscles or organs, which can also be observed in other animal species as well. Practitioners would use their hands and occasionally a craniometer to measure craniums, enlargements, and indentations. A few of the 27 organs included fidelity, instinct of reproduction, horniness, cleverness, forethought, language, gift of music, sense of metaphysics. Is that like your gross motor skills?
Metaphysics?
What is metaphysics?
I don't know. Alec, can you tell us?
I think maybe the sense of metaphysical stuff would be sort of like ESP.
Yeah. That's what it
What
sounds
is ESP?
Like extrasensory perceptions,
like.
like
You're like
seeing
psychic.
ghosts and psychic abilities.
I see. Well, that would be fitting for the Victorian era. There's also kindness and religiosity. But there were few true phrenologists. The Fowler brothers opened an office in New York, the Phrenological Cabinet, which I love the name of that so much. I don't know why. I don't know. It just makes it seem fun. Like you open a little cabinet and you see
Like a
bunch
cabinet
of
of curiosities.
Yes, exactly.
I'm thinking cabinet like political cabinet.
Oh, boo. The Fowler brothers conducted readings and offered a highly popular tourist attraction where attendees could see all of the skulls they'd collected over the years. Perhaps the biggest claim to fame for the Fowler brothers is the Phrenology bust. So that wasn't created until the brothers came around, and they even put their own medical journal out to keep phrenology relevant. However, there were skeptics. A few of my favorites include Mark Twain. He was shocked and appalled when he had his skull read by one of the Fowler brothers, and they gave him a reading that they had found a cavity on his skull where humor is supposed to be. And John Quincy Adams wondered, quote, how two phrenologists could look each other in the eyes without laughing. So for as popular as it was, there were definitely some people who were like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Phrenology lasted way longer than it should have. The Fowler Brothers Journal went on until 1911, and the British Phrenological Society had active members through the 1940s. The true decline of phrenology came around the mid to late 1800s. It was still out there, but more so in pop culture more than like the science-y version they tried to make it. And we were actually able to confirm localized brain theory with Broca's area. I'm sure you're familiar, at least with Broca's area. Or do we want a refresher?
Let's have a refresh.
Okay, so I have a refresh. Also, disclaimer, I did not write this refresh. It came from ChatGPT because I was like making sure my notes were good and I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot to give a refresh of Broca's area. So let's see. No, I know it's good. Don't say that I don't have a full quote. So in 1961, French physician Paul Broca examined the brain of a deceased patient known as Tan. Tan had experienced several language deficits during his life, and despite being able to understand speech and have intact cognitive abilities, Tan could only produce a single syllable. Tan.
Hodor.
Hodor. I want to see the baby. Hence the name given to him. So Tan's condition, known as expressive aphasia or Broca's aphasia, intrigued Broca. Upon examining Tan's brain during autopsy, Broca found a lesion in the posterior part of the frontal lobe on the left hemisphere, specifically in the third frontal convolution. This area is now known as Broca's area, and his observations led him to propose a crucial connection between the frontal lobe and language production. Over time, studies and clinical observations supported Broca's initial findings, and it became evident that damage to Broca's areas in the left hemisphere resulted in expressive language difficulties while leaving his cognitive functions relatively intact. So phrenology has this really dark past, but it also kind of opened the doors to this localized brain theory.
Yeah.
So this guy, Samuel G. Morton, collected over 1,000 skulls. He was a really bigoted white supremacist who used phrenology to support his racist beliefs, and a lot of his skulls came from Native Americans. So there's a dark history there, but it's weird. It's so weird. There were also abolitionists who supported phrenology, and their logic is just odd. So, for example, Horace Mann and Lucretia Mott, she sent her children to phrenological lectures and spoke the truth of phrenology to all of her friends, supported phrenology while also being abolitionist. But as far as the logic for phrenology being backwards with some phrenologists, here's an example. This guy, George Combe, he wrote a book on phrenology, and it was really popular. It sold way more copies than Charles Darwin's Origins of Species. And his idea, he explained, quote, the qualities which make them enslaved people submit to slavery are a guarantee that if emancipated and justly dealt with, they would not shed blood. So they're using phrenology to say like all these people are the same, and that's why, people were able to enslave them. And so they're like docile. And the big thing was like their tameableness of enslaved people that they used phrenology to support. There is way, way more about the dark, fucked up history of phrenology. But I wanted to end it on Joseph Hurdle. He was an anatomist who collected over 139 skulls in the name of proving phrenology wrong. He documented age, name, date of birth, area of birth, and reason for death if possible. Hurdle documented how wildly different each human brain is, and that, quote, functions of individual parts of the brain are so puzzling that a doctrine which attempts to delimit the abilities of a human being by measuring the skull could only be invented by idiots for idiots. Dr. Joseph Hurdle, 1885. And that is our lesson on phrenology.
Wow. Good job.
Thank
Bravo.
you. Thank you so much. I will cite my sources in the show notes.
Yes. We will BRB.
Hey guys, I just wanted to let you know how much it means to Kat and I and Alec that you're here. Honestly, just baseline that you're here listening. Somebody came up to me this week and talked about how they listen to night class, and I'm like, oh my God, that's insane. I don't know that people listen, but I guess you do, and I guess you like it. And I just cannot thank you enough to listening to our crazy banter and lessons.
It really is amazing to feel your guys' support, whether that is a DM or a comment on social media, or just like honestly just the downloads, like just seeing how many people are listening to an episode on release day. It truly is humbling and it warms our heart. And like Hayley said, we're incredibly grateful that you are here.
Truly, truly. And we also couldn't do the show without the support of everyone on Patreon. So I want to give a special shout out, listening as the baseline. Oh my gosh, our hearts are overflowing. Patreon helps out a ton too. The show isn't free to produce. And so as a thank you, we put out extra content there every single week and month.
Yes. Not only are you supporting the show, but you will have access to extra content. We record extra after every single episode and do our extra credit where we share something cool that we learned each week. That goes on Patreon alongside our regular weekly episodes on the main feed. We also record monthly content like our show and tells and now Smart Alec. We're always trying to come up with new things for you guys because we are truly so grateful for you. We could not do this without you. And honestly, we would not do this without you. We don't like screaming into the void, and we're glad we're not.
Absolutely. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. If any of that on Patreon sounded interesting to you, go check it out. See if there's something that you could get into. And if that's not your thing, that's cool too. Just thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hello and welcome.
Hey girl, hey.
I'm here. On May 20th, 1885, a baby was born to a Jewish family in the town of Arlösen in central Germany.
1885?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Same. We have similar eras this week.
We've been in a Victorian era lately.
We will soon leave the Victorian era, but this is where our story begins. When the baby arrived, the midwife declared the child a girl and congratulated the parents on their, quote, lovely daughter. But later in private, she pulls the father aside and says, okay, so the baby has strange, quote unquote, strange characteristics. And like, I have no way of knowing for sure the child's sex. Like, I think it's a girl, but it doesn't look like it usually does. Mm-hmm. So the family was like, okay, but like no one really knew what to do. So they just registered the baby as a girl, named it Martha Baer, and moved on. quote unquote Martha was what we would identify today as an intersex individual, meaning they were born with traits outside of the strict male-female binary.
Which is way more common than you may think.
Yes, definitely. So just a quick little overview of what intersex is. There's a really wide variety of traits that exist under the umbrella of intersex. It can be any combination of male, female anatomy, hormones, or chromosomes. So like what an intersex person can look like and what makes someone intersex is the limit pretty much doesn't exist because it can be any combination of things. And a lot of people won't even know they're intersex until they're older, or they might never know. So it can really look different. And because it can look so different, it's hard to know exactly how many people are intersex.
Right. And get the statistics on it.
Yeah.
So even now, knowing for sure, it's way more common than you may realize.
Yeah.
It's got to be more common than you realize.
Definitely, or at least probably. And also, like, the bar is kind of always moving on what isn't considered intersex as we learn more and more. It's estimated that 1 in 1,500 to 1 in 2,000 births have intersex characteristics. And like I said, even now our understanding is changing. So while the condition was known about at the time of Martha's birth, the average midwife did not have enough information to give the family any sound medical advice. So they kind of just said, I think it's a girl, and then moved on, never talked about it again. Based on what we have from these medical records, we believe that if this child was born today, they would be declared a boy. But this child was raised as a girl, yet they knew from a very young age that they were not really a girl. In his 1907 autobiography, Baer recalls, quote, "I was born as a boy, but raised as a girl." This caused a lot of difficulty in Baer's childhood, as I'm sure you can imagine. And a lot of the difficulty was social. Like, not only, I mean, you have this like internal struggle and these expectations placed on you, but then like it's really hard to make friends, especially back then when it was like so strictly divided between girls and boys. So Baer would be told to go play with the girls, but the girls saw him as a boy and totally ostracized him. One girl at the school once told him, "Get out of here, disgusting boy. None of us want to play with boys, and you're really a boy." Which, like, that's something a kid would say, you know, like to a boy, like, ew, icky, like boys have cooties.
And it's tough when he knew that he was a boy and to hear it affirmed in such a mean way.
Yeah. And like, it's something that he wanted to hide, right? Like you want to mask in order to fit in to an extent.
Yeah, because you feel like it's something, quote,
wrong. Yeah. And then to have someone like be like, say, "I see right through you," essentially, and publicly say that.
And they can say your truth, but in that moment you can't.
Right. Exactly. Like, I can't imagine the turmoil that would take on your mental health. And as Baer reached the age of puberty, his male traits became even more apparent. He started growing facial hair, his voice dropped. He also noticed he was sexually attracted to women, which, I mean, now, of course, we know that women can be attracted to women. And they knew that back then, too, to an extent. But it was definitely considered like a male trait. So along with all these other things, he's like, and now, like, I'm attracted to women. Like, what does this mean? And back then, parents were advised to hide their child's intersex status from them. So while all this is happening to his body and to him from his peers and internally, he has no idea there's a medical explanation for what he's going through.
That's a whole other set of trauma for a child, whether it's information about them medically or, in my opinion, an adoption situation. I think that honesty is always the best policy, and it may not be easy and it may not be comfortable, but you can do so much more when you have the full picture in details.
And you're able to talk
age
about it.
Appropriate, you know? It's like talking about sex shouldn't start at, 13 when you start puberty. There's an appropriate way to talk about gender and sex and identity from the time a baby is a baby up until, and it just evolves as you get older. It should never just be like,
surprise, bitch. Yeah, I 100% agree. And so he's going through all these things, and this is really scary. His voice was all of a sudden low. He thought he had tuberculosis, and this was a symptom of that.
It's like, I'm dying.
Yeah, which is so relatable because I always thought I was dying as a kid. Obviously, I didn't go through anything close to what this is.
I can't believe you didn't get diagnosed with anxiety until this year.
It boggles the mind.
I always thought I was dying as a kid, she says.
Yeah, the way I've been riddled with anxiety my whole life, and nobody called it what it is until I was an adult, is crazy. Anyway, so he thinks this poor kid thinks he has tuberculosis. As he grows up, he becomes an outspoken feminist, and this is the early 1900s, so this is a big deal.
Yeah, they're like, shoot him.
Right.
Or shoot her.
And it makes sense that he would become a feminist because here he is assumed to be a girl and a woman, but they don't fit into these stereotypical boxes of what womanhood should look like. So, of course, they want to fight against those institutions. Also, he had a job at a department store and was sexually harassed there, as many people who work in the service industry are. So, it was kind of like the perfect storm to create these ideals and this sense of, wanting equality and wanting more for herself at the time. During his teens and young adulthood, Baer embraced his attraction to women and entered the queer community, believing he was a lesbian. He ended up moving in with and becoming roommates with another Jewish man who was a major activist against human trafficking, especially of poor women in different, less developed European countries. And I believe this person was also a feminist activist as well. So living with this guy awakened Baer's own passion against human trafficking. And he was already a fervent feminist, and then kind of worked this activism for trafficking victims into that. He just seems like a really cool person and kind of dedicated his whole life to advocacy. He was a big promoter of women's access to education, and he did a lot of grassroots effort organizing local women to campaign for things like kindergarten programs and access to schools for children. This was important because women were, and to a large extent still are, expected to stay home and care for the children. So having access to school gave women free time in order to make money outside the home and have financial independence.
Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
This is in Germany?
Yeah.
Kindergarten sounds like such a German word.
It is a word.
I know it's a word.
Well, it's a German word, I mean.
Okay.
It's a word. Yeah, it is. It comes from
kindergarten.
Kindergarten. Yeah. It is a German word. And I believe
it is a word.
Yeah. Oh my God. Also, having women working outside of the home tied into his human trafficking victim advocacy, in that a lot of times families, or not a lot of times, but sometimes families, really, really poor families, were forced to sell their daughters into trafficking situations because they were struggling so much economically.
They had to make money and
right. Or maybe they thought she'll have a better life, doing this sketchy quote unquote job. And I'm sure a lot of people were swindled into it, not really knowing what would happen.
Yeah. Lied to.
Right. So women having more money would lead to less human trafficking, which is true. I'm sure. he not only like advocated for these ideas, but he also like literally worked with authorities to disclose known human trafficking pathways and help them crack down on it.
And law officials listen to him?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm honestly impressed just with that fact alone.
Well, she was presenting as a woman at this time, so it wasn't like, there was no prejudice against her for like being intersex or trans. Like they didn't know that, is that what you're saying? You're surprised they listened to her, or just because she's a woman?
Just because she's a woman.
Yeah, that true.
Yeah,
that
he
too.
was presenting as a woman. Yeah.
But I mean, he had insight because he had all these like vast networks and like knew a lot of victims and worked with victims, and they were able to tell her things, and then she was able to go to the authorities with that. Throughout all his work, he became known for his human rights activism. He routinely published literature. He gave speeches. He was just a badass bitch. In 1904, Baer moved to Hamburg and got a job as a social worker for the international Jewish organization B'nai B'rith. I really hope I'm saying that right. B'nai B'rith.
It's benign.
It's B'nai, not Brit. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, prior to that, in order to become a social worker, he studied political economy, sociology, and pedagogy. In 1904, he began living as a man.
Wow!
Yes.
Yay!
And I don't know if he was living as a man to everyone or just like sometimes, because when he eventually gets his surgery, a lot of people were surprised. So I think it was like sometimes living as a man, sometimes
if you have
not.
the privilege to know him.
Right.
Yeah.
And it probably depended on the circles. Like I think professionally, maybe still presenting as a woman, but to your close friends, or like in your activities as a man. He started using male pronouns, dressing as a man, growing out his facial hair, and doing other mannish things like smoking cigars and drinking a lot of beer, which I think he already did, but now he's doing it more publicly. Baer wrote, quote, "I introduced myself as a man, never as a woman. What am I really? Am I a man? Oh God, no. It would be an indescribable delight if I were. But miracles don't happen anymore these days."
Anymore? It's hard to imagine miracles happening before 1904.
I think he means like biblical miracles, like magic, like suddenly becoming a man. But, maybe we'll get lucky later in this story. Maybe a miracle will happen. Baer's first serious romantic relationship was with a woman named Beale Halpern. She was married, but her and Baer were deeply, deeply in love, with Halpern being already married, though, and Baer being legally a woman. The two saw no possible future together. It was like Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, no.
So feeling like they couldn't live without each other, but they could never really be together, they made a suicide pact.
No, that is when you move to Antarctica or some shit and live away.
But think about like the political climate. Like I can see it. I mean, obviously no one should I consider this in an ideal world, but like, I don't know, like it's hard. It was so hard for them to imagine, not living together, but also like a world where it would be possible.
A way
for them
around what they were facing is just unimaginable. Yep.
Definitely. So the day before the suicide was planned to happen, fate interceded. Baer was in a tram accident, which landed him in the hospital. And during intake, doctors were confused why this man was registered as a woman on his ID. So they were like, what?
Life-changing typo.
Yeah. They're like, that's weird. So Baer opens up to them about his struggles, and through talking to him and examining him, doctors were able to figure out and finally tell him he was intersex, because until this point, he didn't know. He didn't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You're like, oh my gosh. this guy's losing a lot of blood. What is he talking about? And then you're like, oh, yeah, you're intersex. And he's like, oh my God, there's a word for it. There's this whole side of myself that's always been here, but now we have a descriptor.
Yeah, literally. And I wonder if he knew something, because he was like in like LGBTQ plus circles. So I don't know if maybe he like knew people who like, or if that was like a totally foreign concept to him. I'm not sure, but
I'd be curious to see, but I can't imagine the emotions he felt in that moment, that affirmation.
The impression I got from what I read is that he was like so happy to finally have an explanation.
Aww.
Yeah. So the doctors figure this out, but they don't know what the fuck to do. So they called in a Jewish doctor and sexologist named Magnus Hirschfeld. Magnus Hirschfeld was one of the few experts on Baer's condition at the time.
Was this related to the being hit by a tram? Or they're
Well, they're like, you're intersex, and then he's like, well, what can we do about it? And they're like, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. We just told you that's what's up.
We can stitch you up from the tram.
Right.
But
I wasn't expecting you to ask me to do anything about it. So Magnus Hirschfeld, from the brief amount that I read, he deserves his own night classy lesson. He seems amazing. He was known for his gay rights activism, his feminism, and his anti-racism. When he met with Baer, Hirschfeld suggested a, quote, little surgery, which Baer enthusiastically accepted. He's like, thank God, like we can do something about this. Using Hirschfeld's recommendation and a permit from the Prussian Interior Ministry, Baer was able to obtain the first ever sex change operation, which now I think the preferred nomenclature is a gender affirmation surgery, in 1906.
That's way earlier than I thought that it would have been.
And we don't know exactly what Baer's surgery entailed. We can assume it was something pretty rudimentary.
Yeah.
Since it was the first one.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, doesn't really matter. It was the first gender affirming surgery that we know of. Yeah. And that is huge. It was, one big step in the right direction. So we don't know what his surgery was exactly, because records of the surgery were lost during World War II. They were likely destroyed by the Nazis, who targeted Hirschfeld and his work specifically. They burned his library and all his documents in it in 1933, and we think that's probably where Baer's surgery details were. That makes me sad on so many levels, because obviously, things that happen throughout history have ripples throughout time, but just the erasure that the LGBTQ plus community and the Jewish community has had to endure through the years is heartbreaking.
It's incredibly tragic. And through doing this research, like just in this one story, like there's multiple instances where it's like, oh, we just don't have these records anymore. Like just in this one story. And even today, like there aren't many sources. It's hard to find. And like people are only really recently digging into this person's life.
And it wasn't that long ago.
No, it's really not. And I mean, part of the reason this got buried is because it occurred right before Nazi takeover. So after his surgery, Hirschfeld gave lectures about Baer. He called Baer a, quote, man who was mistakenly identified as a woman, and said this 21-and-a-half-year-old lived until today as a woman. And from now on, with the authorities' approval, she intends to continue her life as a man with a man's name and clothes. And that's what he did. He embraced being a man.
Did he get his legal gender changed? Was that?
Yep. So the government fully recognized it. In 1907, he was able to change his name. So now his ID is male, and he chose the first name Karl. I I read in one source, but then I think I read it in one source and then I couldn't find it again. But if I'm remembering correctly, he chose the name Karl after the doctor who performed his surgery.
Okay, that's very cute.
Yeah, I'm going to choose to believe that. Don't quote me on it. But that's what I think I remember. And he made his middle initial M. So if you recall, his former name was Martha, and he had published a lot of writing under the name Martha. So that name was to keep
still attached.
Yeah, M. Baer attached him to that writing. Later in life, he said that the M stood for Max. And then eventually his headstone had the middle name inscribed as Mayer. But on his official documentation, it was just an M. It wasn't anything. I think he kind of I think it probably was to keep him connected to the name Martha. And then he just kind of told people it stood for different things as he felt like it throughout the rest of his life.
My great-grandfather's name was TC.
Yeah.
It didn't stand for anything.
It was a weird thing people did back in the day. Just letters as names.
Yeah. It was like a choose your own adventure.
Yeah. Author and playwright Rudolf Presper had previously known Karl as a woman. This person described meeting him again after his operation and what it was like. He said, quote, "Instead of the young woman, a young man appeared before me, her twin brother. His hair was cut short and he wore men's clothes. His steps in men's trousers were small and somewhat hesitant. His movements were a little forced, as a child's. They seemed to be trying to cast off the restrictions of 2 decades."
Yeah, it's not easy to get rid of these mannerisms that you feel like you have to form to as a kid, and just ones that you have from watching the other, in his case, girls around you, what they do. I remember being in my freshman year of college, walking to a party one night and being like, that girl's her hips sway as she moves. My hips are just meh. That's it, just straight. I'm fast walking. I'm speed walking all the time. Yeah. But man, and I was drunk and being what happens if I try and do my hips like that? I'm oh my gosh, I can't do it. But that's, for some people, that's just how they walk. But that's also an adopted mannerism that's considered a feminine way to walk, to sway your hips.
Yeah, when you spend your life masking so much, those things don't just unravel overnight. You have a lot of habits to unlearn. Even if your habits the new habits feel more natural, it still takes time. Also probably a bit of imposter syndrome almost, for lack of a better word. And I'm speculating. I don't know what this is like at all, but I can imagine I don't know, kind of starting a new job in a way, which is a vast oversimplification, but I think you understand what I'm saying.
I do.
Okay.
I hope you do too, dear listener.
Yes. Dr. Hermann Simon, the director of the Jewish Center on Berlin's new synagogue, recalls a story his aunt told him, and his aunt was friends with Karl. She originally was friends with Martha, and she told him this story. She says, one day her friend Martha said goodbye to her and all her friends and told them she was moving to a new town to take a new job. And they all said goodbye to her. But then not long after, this guy named Karl Baer shows back up. And Karl looked exactly like Martha, but with men's clothes on. And they were all kind of okay. But they just kind of accepted him back in the friend group and said they just didn't ask too many questions. It just kind of...
Nice. Yeah. I absolutely love that. They're okay, same, but different.
Yeah, I think
You're still the same person. But even more so now, you get to be yourself and learn truly what that is.
Right. I think it's a nice approach. I think when some people come out, they want the fanfare, but some people, and I think this applied to Karl, just wanted to live the life he felt like he was already living, you know? And later in life, he becomes very low key. And so I don't think he's someone who really thrived on a lot of attention. So from the very little I know about him, this seems like a good approach. Let's see. So now that Karl was legally a man, he was able to marry his love, Beale Halpern. She left her husband and they got married.
I forgot.
Yeah, she was married before. Maybe he was a piece of shit. Now she's free of him and married her true love. So that year together, they wrote and published a semi-fictional, semi-autobiographical book about Karl's life. It was titled Memoirs of a Man's Maiden Years.
Oh, that's such a good name.
Really good name.
Freaking poetic.
And I think it's only semi-fictional, mostly because he changed a lot of the details of his life and wrote it under a pseudonym so that he wouldn't be identified.
Oh, yeah. He definitely doesn't thrive on attention.
Yeah. And like this was a pretty popular book. People were fascinated by this story. Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld, the doctor that initially referred him for this surgery, said he hoped the book would be a resource for other intersex children, show them they're not alone and that there are options out there. And the book was made into a movie in 1919. But like I alluded to before, this was right before the Nazis and World War II. So tragically, no copies of the film are still surviving that we know of.
Oh my.
I know. Also, tragically, Beale died of pneumonia only about 1.5 years into her marriage to Karl. So I'm glad they got to be together, but it was short-lived.
A short time.
Mm-hmm. And after she passed away, he married her friend, Elsa Max.
Okay, so now he's a player.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like this happens a lot where when you lose your spouse, sometimes you get together with someone else who was close to them, like a sibling or a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Like you both are traumatized and miss them. So maybe you're spending time together. I don't know. I kind of understand where this is coming from. The two lived together.
Alec and I are like, okay.
You know what I mean, right?
To Tommy.
No, that is not.
Stay away from my boyfriend.
Shut up. I didn't
sign the contract. Sign it.
I didn't even think about that. You know what I mean, though? Like, I don't think it was like there was anything nefarious going on. Because I think when people hear like, oh, he got with her friend, you would immediately assume cheating. There's no reason to believe that. I think
that's not what I assumed.
Okay.
I just thought it was an interesting leap.
It is interesting. And like,
everything about this man is interesting.
He's very interesting. So the two lived together in Berlin, where Karl worked as an insurance agent. He kept working also as a prominent Jewish activist.
An insurance agent?
An insurance
I kind
agent.
of like that. Insurance agent.
Insurance agent. And prominent Jewish activist for the Council for Jewish Life. Sadly, his work in the Jewish community made Karl a target of the Nazis when they rose to power in the 1930s. In 1937, Karl was captured in a raid on his workplace and held by the Nazis, where he was interrogated and tortured for, I think, about 1 year.
Oh my God.
He wasn't released until 1938. And at this point, after his release, he kind of saw the writing on the wall. He is lucky to have made it out at all, and he knows that. So he sold all his belongings, he sold his apartment, and took his wife, and they fled to Palestine. In Palestine, he kind of gave up his activism and tried to keep just his head down and live a normal life as an insurance agent. And I think some people might point to that and be like, you know, he's a sellout, like,
oh,
like
no.
Giving up, but not at, like, he worked as an activist for years and years and years. He paid his dues. Mm-hmm. He endured torture and trauma for his activism. Like, he is completely entitled to just lay low, and do his own thing. Yeah. And I don't know that I necessarily saw anyone, but like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of times when people are activists when they're young and then they like achieve some of what they were fighting for, like he got his gender affirmation surgery and moved to safety. Like, I feel like, I don't know, there's sometimes a tendency to look down on that. But again, I don't think you should. And I think especially in this case, like he did his time.
Yeah. Things change, things happen, trauma happens. And one thing that has helped me in life to not be a hateful bitch is to operate under the belief that everyone is always doing the best that they can.
Exactly.
In that moment.
Yeah. None of us are doing like the most that we possibly can, you know, like no matter how good of an activist or an ally you are, you could always do better. So to look down on someone for doing less than you, it's like, well, someone doing better than me can look, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's not a competition and you don't always have to get better. Like it's okay and it's exhausting to operate under the belief that you can always do more and always should do more.
Right.
Like growth comes in phases and it's okay to just be as you are and be who you are. You don't have to be constantly chasing more and more and more.
Especially in this case where he's literally an intersex Jewish man in Germany in the 1930s.
Oh
like,
my God.
It's hard to think of a more oppressed group. So yeah, he's fully entitled to do whatever the fuck he wants. And
just living is an act of
resistance.
Yes,
absolutely. And he kind of did do whatever the fuck he wanted. He ended up striking up a relationship with his secretary. I meant to say secretary, but secretary is fitting. Her name was Gilta Fish, which great name. She ended up moving in with him and his wife, and it appears they had a little bit of a polyamorous relationship.
Okay.
In 1947, his wife Elsa died and he married Gilta. Then in 1950, he went blind and was forced to retire. And then we don't really know anything else about the rest of his life. Like I said, he kept a pretty low profile. Like he wrote his memoir and then just like pretty quickly we stopped seeing any documentation from him.
And he's still alive today. Check out his Instagram at Karl with a K.
He did die in 1956. And he was buried in Tel Aviv under the name Karl Baer. And that is the story of Karl Baer and the first gender affirmation surgery.
Wow. I loved learning about Karl and his full and inspiring and heartbreaking and all of the things life. That was really great.
It's nice that this story has a happy ending. Like obviously he endured so much, but in the end he got to live like a normal life, you know, and it's nice.
It's nice.
Yeah. But anyway, that was my lesson this week. We are going to continue this conversation over on Patreon, where I and Hayley and Alec have some fun facts to share. As always, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support. There are other ways you can support the show. You can tell your friends about it. You can follow us on social media. You can rate, review, and subscribe. And of course, you can support us monetarily on Patreon. Thank you. We love you. And 3, 2, 1, class dismissed.